All right. All right. How's it going, everybody? Hope this message finds you well. We're back with another special episode with my good buddy, Alex Feinberg. Alex, what's up?
Always a pleasure to chat with you, my man.
Dude, I was just actually, I re-listened to our podcast we did the other day. It's great.
Was it as good as the ones we did in 2020?
Better.
That's a high bar.
Well, it's better because we're together.
I see.
I think it really is better than when you're just not looking at a screen.
Okay. I got you.
Get the feeling a little bit more. Alex and I are talking about debt. What do you think, Alex? What do you think about being debt-free?
I think the average consumer should have substantially less debt. I think consumer debt has basically no place in anybody's life. There's always going to be some exceptions to that, but I have said for quite some time, if you need to get a loan to buy a car, you can't afford that car. There's plenty of cheaper cars that will get you from point A to point B. Go get a 15-year-old Toyota. Those things are fairly reliable. They'll get you from point A to point B. It might not be in style. You might think that your job requires you to have some sort of style. You're probably inflating that in your mind. It's possible, but most people will inflate that in their mind. So I think consumer debt, there's very, very little point in having that. We can get into arguments about, does it make sense to have mortgage debt? Mortgage debt in most states at most amounts is tax deductible. It's typically at a lower rate than car debt or credit card debt. And so at that point, it's not even about the math, it's about the emotion. And so, for some people, or perhaps more than some people, they would benefit from not having that emotional burden. But I think the math, at the very least on mortgage debt, is a lot more justifiable than the math on almost any other kind of debt.
Yeah, at least for current rates, especially if you got a rate over the last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Compared now, I think it's up a little bit, 7.5% interest. What is it even possible though for someone who has never experienced not having debt to know the emotional freedom that they're going to have by being debt free?
I don't know, because I've spent most of my adult life on the no debt side of the equation until I picked up a mortgage, which we've argued I don't necessarily consider to be that onerous. But one thing I will say is that the average American doesn't look at items in terms of the amount they cost. They look at items in terms of the amount they will cost per month.
Yep.
And that was very eye-opening to me when I started working for myself, realizing people will pay me $100 a month for 6 months instead of paying me $400 up front. Mm-hmm. And just being a math guy, thinking that's mafia style interest rates that people are willing to pay so they can spread a payment out over multiple months rather than do it right away. And then talking to various coaches and realizing that if you apply a frugal mindset to the average American consumer, you're never going to understand why people spend the amount of money that they spend on things.
Yeah.
But at the very least, a habit that everybody should have as young and an age as possible is, something doesn't cost $1,000 a month. It costs $35,000.
Yes.
Right. So
add the interest to that too.
Yeah. Keep the nominal price of something that you pay in mind. Anytime you break a large price up into a monthly payment, that's a salesperson trying to convince you that you can afford the small number because it's not actually a big number.
Yeah, and death by 1,000 cuts. You're just talking about the importance of cash flow and how I look at cash flow. And I think that's one area that people really miss, especially with the subscription-based services that we have, consumer culture. You're probably paying for, at least I'd say the average person is paying for $100+ of subscriptions that they might not even see, because this comes out so small.
Oh,
$1 here, $10 here, $7 here.
Yeah.
That stuff adds up over the years, and death by 1,000 cuts. This is something I learned within my business. Within 2 years, I started really picking up on I'm paying for all of these different subscriptions for what I thought I needed at the time within the brand. And I actually don't need those things now. So every quarter I trim my fingernails.
Well, that's a good idea.
Every single quarter. Yeah, I take a look at everything. What do I need? What do I not need? What did I thought I needed at that time? And was that oftentimes it's just vanity. It's often this. It's a 7-day free trial, and I used it for the 7 days or 3 days, and I've never used it again.
That's why they give it to you for free, so they can sell you 3 months.
Nothing's free.
For free.
Nothing's really free. And then next thing you know, I'm paying on that thing monthly, or it comes out once, and it's renewed the next year without me seeing it.
Sure.
So every quarter, I just take, it takes 30 minutes at the coffee shop, and I just trim my fingernails.
Yeah.
And hell, man, over this last year, I've saved. I've literally, this is a little bit of a higher number because I've had some situations within my business that I was able to cut some major expenses out of, but I've saved literally thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Per month.
Yeah.
Per month. Which is well over 10 grand to 12 grand a year I'm saving by just trimming my fingernails. And oftentimes you can call places, like I called Comcast, like, oh, I'm not going to pay this for this camera system, whenever I can get it here. Like, oh, okay, we'll do it for this then.
Right.
I saved $200 a month on it.
Right.
So now that I've saved $200 a month, I don't know, $400 payment, what is that over 12 months?
$200 a month times 12 months, $2,400.
$2,400.
Yeah.
Sweet. I just saved an overhead.
Right. You're paying Comcast $400 a month?
Yeah. For it's like this. There's like their business system where it has like all the cameras in the gym, and you can look at the app. And
yeah, you should always negotiate with your internet service providers, because they can always go lower. You tell them that you got a better deal somewhere else, all of a sudden you're paying 40% less than you thought you.
Bro, this is my mom. She's with this insurance too, because she lives in Florida, and her car insurance keeps just going up. Like doubled since she's been there.
Sure.
She's like, I'm not in an accident. I've been driving for fucking 50 years. So she calls him, and she's like, I'm not paying this. I'm not going to pay whatever you're having. She's like, I need at least 50% off. It's like, okay. And he's like, gave it to her.
How about this? Is this enough? Yeah.
Yeah, that works. So yeah, man, I do notice this. So one thing, I have a lot of buddies who do very well financially, guys who make a whole lot more money than me. And they talk about leverage a lot, and they're leveraging this and leveraging that. And I'm like, okay, that's cool for that metric of finding success in the way that you're viewing it. But I pay a ton of attention to their lifestyle. Like, I was on a retreat with a guy who does a lot of leverage stuff, and every few hours he had to be on his device.
Sure.
And I said, oh.
Because he's always on the brink of failure.
I said, okay.
Always on the brink of blow up.
Yeah, you have to keep it together all the time.
Yeah.
So when in the Bible it says the debtor is always a slave to the lender, it makes a whole lot of sense. And I was sharing this with Alex. I said, yeah, Alex, but not just like in the physical world of doing things and achieving the amount of money that you need to achieve each month to pay for it, keep the house standing, but the mental space. Mm-hmm. You're a slave to it in the mental space. In Ecclesiastics, it's like it says something along these lines. It's a great tragedy that man spends his whole day working and he can't even rest at night because he thinks about it in his sleep. Mm-hmm. So like we're constantly being a slave to it whenever we're choosing to accept all of this debt. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, yeah, house is fine. And I know some people are really married to their 2.9% interest rates, and I don't blame them. I don't blame you with your 2.9% interest rate. That'd be really hard for me to not want to pay my house off at 2.9% either. But once
I got.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm open with you. But I like to push you in things, and you always say I'm 5 years ahead on things. So I think this is another one that you should trust me on.
Maybe.
What it does for the mental space, I believe, is it's far superior than what's 3% interest on that. Like, okay, so you're making an extra 3% in the market, we'll say. I mean, what the fuck, dude? What's that, 30K a year? What? I don't know. Whatever that number is it really worth it? If you can make 30, 40K a month anyways, is it really worth, is all the stress, and if you're not stressing it that much, but all that pressure of the overhead of having to achieve that number each month, is it really worth the 30K?
Well, that's a more sophisticated way of looking at life that I think I'm working towards, and a lot of other people are working towards, where people who make a lot of money frequently have simpler objectives than people who make a little bit of money, because you don't make a lot of money if you don't hit a couple home runs. And once you hit a couple home runs, it makes you kind of realize, like, why am I so consumed about picking up pennies in so many different places when I can pick up dollars in like 2 places? And it kind of reminds me of a time I was hanging out with one of my college teammates and one of his teammates who were in town playing against the Oakland A's about 8 years ago. And I was up for promotion at Google, and what that would have meant for me at the time was a pay increase from about 160K to what turned out to be about 210K the following year. I thought the promotion was for less than that, but we're talking about a 50K jump, and 160K was plenty for me to live as a single person in San Francisco with roommates. So I was not wanting for money, and making 50K more wasn't going to put me in any different lifestyle bracket. At the same time, your company tries to make it seem like it's a big deal for you to get promoted. Oh, people work for 2 years for this, blah, 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 just to make it seem that you're accomplishing a lot by not really accomplishing much working for them. And I go hang out with one of my college buddies and his teammate, and I'm looking to my left, and I'm like, this guy made $170,000 today, and he's going to make that. He's contractually obligated to get paid that every day during the season for 180 days, and they're contractually obligated to pay him every year for 6 years, 7 years, whatever it is. And his teammate, I can look up his contract online. His teammate's making $60,000 a day, every single day. And they're just fucking around, dipping, playing video games, among other things, as their extracurricular hobbies. And I'm just thinking, like, man, these guys. And you kind of oversimplify it. Oh, these guys have it great. Well, they have really high pressure jobs too, but they're good at one thing. And if you're really good at one thing, or fairly good at like two things, it can be very stressful, but it can allow you to focus on not trying to save $15,000 doing this and trying to arbitrage, another opportunity, making a couple $1,000s here. And all that stuff takes up mental energy. There's not, you can only work on, 8 different projects max in a year anyway. And so do you really want one of them to be a project that yields you like $5,000? You probably don't.
Yeah, you probably don't. And then I believe it gets even more narrow. The further you go, the more you realize, like, okay, 8 projects should be 6 should be 4, and 4 should be 2. Mm-hmm. I believe too that we should always be narrowing down. Where I don't believe in over niching, especially if you're early in building. We'll talk about brands for specific. I think overly niching yourself really limits your potential if you're good. Because typically people, if they're smart enough to get a business off the ground, actually make money from it, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month to get started. You're probably good at more than just one thing. This is what I was pitching to you forever. I'm like, dude, it's cool that you know how to cook, and you really that was a breakthrough that you showed with me, and I thought it was a great skill, and I thought you could take it way further than just selling ebooks for a long time. Mm-hmm. I was like, but I don't hang out with you because you know how to cook. Right. I hang out with you because of your mind. Sure. And the way you see things and mental models, and I actually want to talk about that today with you with the kingpin mentality. We relate a lot with this. Mm-hmm. So if you overly niche though, and you're just only talking about this, you're actually limiting your potential. And I believe you're starting to experience that over the last few years as you're doing the high executive coaching.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's a couple different ways you can look at that, because if you should niche down if it enables you to charge an obscene amount for your time, because on the high level, if you can solve a very particular business problem, you can effectively charge a couple $1,000s an hour for people, right? And so if you've identified a problem that you can solve for $10,000 a clip, a few times a week for various people, of course you should be niching down.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to be romantic about it either. Everyone wants to be like, oh, find your passion and do it romantic about. I'm like, no. I was like, that's cool if that works for you. It's cool that works within my career, but there's still parts of business that I just don't enjoy doing. I was trying to, I spent 45 minutes the other day trying to get my Google storage to, this is a click of one button, but it took me forever because, I'm not good at my computer stuff.
Right.
So there's parts of my business that I don't enjoy doing. I think a lot of people have these high dollar skills that they might be like, yeah, but I'm really passionate about fitness, so I want to coach fitness. I'm like, that's fine. Go make fucking $50 an hour, $100, whatever they're charging for fitness per hour. You can go do that. That's fine. But this skill you have over here when consulting can make you $800 an hour. Mm-hmm. So you could work a fraction of the time, even if you're not passionate about every hour that you're working.
Right. Yeah. So, niching down for less than a couple $100s an hour is a very questionable move. Probably does not make sense to do that. When you start making over a couple $100,000 an hour, okay, if you want to niche down. But it depends on what kind of mind you have, right? So some people are not very intellectually curious. They're probably not the people who are listening to this right now, so we might not be talking to them. But for people who are not intellectually curious, they kind of need to niche down because they're not going to be able to navigate life at a fast enough speed to be able to capture the breadth of opportunities that might be afforded someone else in their shoes. And so if you recognize that you're just like cognitively limited and you can't swallow the the water as it comes out of the hose, like, yeah, maybe you need to slow it down and niche up. But if you're into personal development and you're the type of person who finds a way to succeed in whatever environment that you're in, you will typically benefit from waiting to niche down until the opportunity becomes so obvious for you that, like, yeah, why would I not focus on this thing that's just knocking on my door to give me money?
Yeah.
I don't even have to do much outbound for it. Like, there's so much demand coming inbound that at a high price, like, yeah, of course I niche down on this.
Yeah, there's this thing too where a lot of times there's like overlap. So there'd be overlap for me in my personal development coaching and fitness coaching. There's naturally an overlap there, and business coaching. They're all touching each other pretty close, because oftentimes when guys are struggling in business, it's actually like it's a mindset thing. It's they actually need to work on themselves more, and their business will improve. This keeps me in a healthy state of creativity because I'm working on a couple different projects with a couple different people, to where if I begin to only work on business things and I'm not actually exposing to the person, like, hey, this is actually like a limiting mindset thing that you have, and here's how you can work through this. It's going to make my job really, really boring for me. So I also believe people who are intellectually curious, if they're just doing one thing, like, you can be continually more curious about that one thing. But if you can if you can use peripheral vision, if you can open yourself up a little bit more, I believe there can actually be more success and more enjoyment in your job space.
But that really depends on your way of learning. And so I found it to be the same way when I was at work at Google. It's really, really interesting that we're talking about this, because this is exactly what I pursued intuitively in my career at Google, where in Silicon Valley, when I was working there, 10 years ago, you could make up to like $250,000 a year as a generalist. So you didn't have to know anything about anything at Google, and you could make $250,000 a year and work like 35 hours a week, right? Maybe even less if you found the right team. But if you wanted to jump to make like $300,000, $400,000 a year, all of a sudden you had to specialize in something, and you had to work like 50 or 60 hours a week. And so I always thought, like, that's a really dumb trade that people are making. It's a much better quality of life to be making $250,000 working 35 hours a week and having the optionality to go one of 6 different ways, depending on, how the ball bounces, to hyper focus on one thing where you're only making 50% more at a higher tax bracket. So you're really only making 30% more or something like that. But then you're working 50% more to do it. You're working 50% more to make 10% less per hour, and you're hyper specialized because you're not going to go from being a specialist to a generalist. It's like a one-way street in someone's career. And a lot of these corporate employees don't think through this because they're surrounded by voices and peers telling them, well, obviously you want to get promoted, because you can't stay at a corporation for very long if you make it obvious that that it's not necessarily intelligent to get promoted, right? They want everybody to want to get promoted. That's how they get people to work hard. But if you realize, like, no, actually, I am in my best position getting overpaid for something that's not that hard than getting, maybe paid fairly for something that is very hard and stressful, I'm content. Corporations don't like hiring content people because they can't whip them.
Yeah. I think status has a lot to do with this too, or people get bought into, like, well, so-and-so has this job and this promotion, and people see it within that light. So they're like, oh, it's a status play too. Yeah. Which the corporations, I believe, also have in their back pocket.
Yeah, they love it. Well, it's not just status. They like to foment insecurity, right? And so they'll, if you're on a sales team, they'll talk about how good of a job oh, Jay's doing a great job. He closed this deal, he closed that deal. They're not doing it to pump Jay up so much as they are to make you feel insecure about not closing the deal yourself.
100%.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
And
well, you want what Jay wants. Like,
right.
You want his status.
Right,
That's what I'm saying. You want
right.
his status. And they present that in a way that makes you feel insecure if you don't have it.
Right. And, because insecurity makes people move. I mean, I remember years ago, I'd have, online coaches trying to get me to pay him money, tell me, oh, this guy I'm working with is making this much. This guy I'm working with is making that much. And, it's like different business model. It doesn't matter. And, but anything that people can do to cause you to feel insecure is a way that they can control you, right? So your insecurity, you might think your insecurity is fuel for performance, and it may be fuel for you, but it's leverage for somebody else.
100%. This is very similar to like when you mentioned, like when you started feeling insecure, you felt you needed to buy something.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking at new shoes.
Yeah.
But I fucking wear shoes. I want to buy this car. Like, why do I want to buy this car? Like, someone made you feel insecure.
Yep.
Men don't like to admit that, though. Men don't like to admit that they're insecure ever, because it feels like weakness.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna stay the victim to a problem that you're not confronting head on.
Yeah.
So, don't admit it all you want. It doesn't mean it's not there.
The less likely you are to, if you don't spearhead these things, they will control you. I was chatting with a friend this morning, and I was like, man, nobody's more lifeless than the guy who has two bosses above him, and he literally is on a leash. He has to do absolutely everything they say at all times. Like, there's no sense of power, there's no sense of authority, or there's no sense of control. They just feel as if they're being controlled, and that individual becomes very, very lifeless. Nobody plans to be in that position, but nobody plans to not be either.
Well, and then the interesting thing, if you notice how American consumer purchases have changed over the last decade or so, everybody's trucks are getting bigger, right? But their trucks are getting bigger. They're getting poorer. The average American's getting poorer.
Yeah.
Right? The average American has less control over his family, over his marriage, less control over his trajectory at work, more bosses that he needs to listen to, but his truck is bigger. That's like,
Bro, imagine if you don't have the truck payment and you don't have the house payment. Like, you stay in the modest home and you're less controllable. Like, this is the thing, like, it really cracks me up, especially with our community who act like they're a bunch of alphas and they're hip to the game and they're anti-government, but they buy all their shit. They actually go to the grocery store, they buy all their shit at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. They buy the big vehicle, and of course they need to get a bigger house because so-and-so got a bigger house. So then they buy the bigger house, and so-and-so's kids wear that clothes, so then they got to buy that clothes for their kid. They're actually, they're a product of the culture.
Sure.
And now they have to go and they have to listen to that boss. They have to work that job. They have to work that overtime. They have to be about that life because of the decisions they're making on the backside.
And they have no margin for error because they didn't just buy the big house. They bought the biggest house that they could possibly qualify for from a loan standpoint.
Yeah.
Right. So I didn't even realize this until I bought a house because, like, with my W-2 income at the time, I could have qualified to buy like a $1.5 million house or something. But why do I want to have $1 million worth of debt? Like, no way.
It's crazy. I got approved for that years ago, like 2019. I was approved for like $1.5 million house. I'm like, what? I said, y'all are in the you just give this to everybody?
And they do.
I'm like, you're really just saying I can buy and then what happened? Like, immediately I felt like myself, like, well, I can afford a $1.5 million. I started walking around a little bit like I'm a big deal because the bank would give me 1.5. I don't got that fucking much. I mean, that much money in investments, let alone fucking liquid.
Right.
But I think I'm a bigger deal now because I can live in that house.
Right.
Because they trust me enough to live there.
Right. And so for every one of you or me who's like, yeah, why would I want that? Like, no way. There's probably 3 or 4 people who are like, yep, I deserve that. Right? And guess who the companies want to hire? They want to hire the guy who needs to make $20,000 a month.
Bro, this I deserve it energy is the worst. You always, like, PD shared this with me so good. He's like, we deserve nothing. God's already paid it all for us, so we don't even deserve it. And if you can live in that spirit of I deserve absolutely nothing, it's already been given to me, it's a gift. And you can live in that spirit, he goes, all your decisions will just change. You'll start making decisions with such more humility. And you'll be like, I forget the exact, he shared it in a group a few weeks ago, but it was so good because it just changed this, like, oh, at the end of the day, I deserve to have this drink. At the end of the day, I've been tired, so I deserve to rest with my fit. But if you believe that you don't deserve any of it and that God's already paid all that for you and it's a gift, it shifts the everyday thinking. And for me, it's just so big where, you know, we talked about this a couple times already, and how you just mentioned at the conference about like, Zach, not everyone has this XYZ lifestyle that you got, this, that, and third. And I said, yeah, but I'm reaping we got a guy right here just pushing a grocery cart as I'm trying to turn in this highway. I said, yeah, but I'm reaping the benefits of the decisions that I made. Was that guy have a bomb in there or something?
This is a $1.5 million house.
I'm reaping the decisions I made back in 2019 right now, those financial decisions. Mm-hmm. I don't believe the majority of people are thinking downstream enough.
At all. No, not even enough. At all.
To see that the decisions we make today affects our tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. And how this originally started for me was, and I still do it, I still talk about it all the time, and people just don't fucking listen, and it doesn't get a lot of likes or retweets because it's not sexy or flashy. But I say, you have to set your next day up the night before. You got to get your clothes out. You got to get this. You got to get this. You got to make your next day frictionless. It's called loving on your future self. And if you do that and you start getting in that habit, you start getting in that mindset to take care of yourself tomorrow, you slightly inconvenience yourself now to make your tomorrow less friction, you're going to go further the next day.
And not just your days, you know, you can even think about your months, where the higher the fixed costs you have per month, the less latitude you have for experimentation. And so, you know, Zach's just telling me, an hour ago that I need to cut down a few $1,000s a month house payment. And, you know, maybe he's right, you know, maybe he's not. But what I can guarantee you is if you have a $10,000 a month house payment, which basically everybody in California has, if you just bought in California, right? Because if you're getting $1 million house, that's going to cost you $10,000 a month. If you have a $10,000 a month house payment and then $1,000 a month of car payments, you have to eat. Like if you have $15,000 per month of mandatory payments, how much room do you have for experimentation in your life? It's very, very difficult for somebody, particularly if your income doesn't exceed it by that much. So if you have to make $15,000 a month and you make like $16,000 a month, you can't experiment with anything.
Yeah.
Right? It's very difficult for you to sacrifice time today to make it back in 3 years, because you need to invest all of your time today to taking care of today's expenses.
It's scalable though.
What do you mean?
In the opposite way. Well, it's scalable. Like if the less and less you have, the more and more you can experiment. The more scalable.
Of course. Yes.
And that's just not like in business. It's like your mindset.
Yes.
Taking time away from work. Like, why do we have to work? Who decided we have to work our whole fucking life? Like, who decided that was the way to go about things? Then we have to work within this structure to earn this money. Why not work on ourselves? Why not work on a garden? Why not work on passion projects? Why not work on relationships? There's more work to do than just the work for keeping the economy going.
Sure.
So when I share this stuff with you about paying off your house, well, you see my house payment. I was like, yeah, but there's more and more room to experiment. It's more and more scalable. But sometimes Alex will listen to me and other times he won't, and he'll come back 5 years later and be like, motherfucker, that was a good idea. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Alex still got his Trump hat on. We'll talk politics next time.
Peace.